Imagine sitting in your living room on a November night in 1987. You're flipping the channels, maybe settling in for some sports highlights or the evening news. It's just another ordinary evening till suddenly the screen flickers. The broadcast you've been watching cuts to static. Then, out of nowhere, a distorted, rubbery face appears. It's not an actor. It's not a commercial. It's a man in a rubber Max Headroom mask, jerking and twitching against a spinning background, speaking in strange bursts with garbled audio. For 90 seconds, chaos takes over the airwaves. No station control, no explanations. Just a bizarre intruder staring directly out of your television. And then, just as suddenly it vanishes. That night became ground zero for one of the strangest unsolved crimes in broadcast history, the Max Headroom broadcast hijacking. The events took place in Chicago, Illinois, home to bustling TV stations, local sports coverage, and millions of viewers tuned in. The first strike happened during a live broadcast of a Chicago Bears football recap on WGN Channel 9. Sports anchor Dan Roan was mid-sentence when the screen suddenly went black. Within seconds, the normal game highlights were replaced by the crude, flickering figure of Max Headroom. But unlike the slick TV character from Coca-Cola ads and music videos at the time, this was a twisted parody. The man wore a rubber Max Headroom mask with jagged edges, a plastic coat, and behind him spun a wobbly, homemade background mimicking the famous digital grid. There was no sound, only buzzing static. Engineers scrambled. For 25 seconds, viewers stared at one of the eeriest interruptions ever broadcast. Then, just as quickly, WGN cut the signal, regained control, and the game returned to the screen. Dan Roan looked confused, muttered about technical difficulties, and moved on. Most people figured it was a simple glitch, but they had no idea the real nightmare was just about to start. Viewers were tuning in for an episode of Doctor Who. The sci-fi cult classic was midway through an episode when, without warning, the screen warped again. And there was the Max Headroom figure jerking, convulsing, laughing through distorted voices. But this time, the audio worked. And what that voice said still rattles anyone who has seen it. The masked figure spoke in a muffled, mocking tone, riffing on commercials, politics, and nonsense phrases. He muttered about Coca-Cola and Catch the Wave, mocked the local sports broadcaster, and called out TV stations by name. The entire thing felt like a fever dream broadcast live into thousands of homes, and then it cut back. Viewers sat in stunned silence. Their beloved Doctor Who episode resumed, but the damage was done. For 90 seconds, the hijacker had completely seized the airwaves. Think about that. In 1987, there were no streaming services, no internet. Like today, TV was the center of every living room. And suddenly, an anonymous figure had slipped through the cracks of the broadcast system, hijacking the very medium America trusted most. It was creepy, weird, and incomprehensible. This wasn't a technical error, was a person, hidden somewhere in the Chicago night, breaking through the lines and yelling into the public's living rooms, and no one could stop him. By the following morning, Chicago was buzzing. Newspapers blared with headlines about the TV hacker. Radio shows replayed descriptions of the bizarre 90-second stunt. Even Doctor Who fans were talking about how their episode had been cut midstream by some masked lunatic. The police, the FCC, and the TV networks suddenly had to treat this like a serious crime. And make no mistake, was in the United States, hijacking a television signal was a federal offense, punishable by heavy fines and even prison time. Whoever this was, he hadn't just been pulling a prank. He had committed an act of piracy in one of the most public ways possible. Investigators began piecing together how the hijack had worked. To pull this off, the hacker hadn't broken into studios or cut cables. Instead, they had found a way to broadcast a stronger signal, powerful enough to override the station's own transmissions. Think of it like a pirate radio station, but at a higher, technical level, sending a rogue broadcast into the sky that replaced the licensed feed viewers were meant to see. It required knowledge of broadcasting equipment, access to transmitters, and the perfect timing to hit 2 different channels on the same night. No amateur could stumble into this. Whoever did it, planned it, rehearsed it, and executed it in chilling style. The mystery only deepened. The hijacker hid his identity so well. The Max Headroom mask completely obscured his face. His voice was deliberately muffled through distortion. The crude background was recognizable enough to parody the famous character, but cheap enough to hide his real location. Even the camera seemed tilted and chaotic, adding to the feeling that you were watching from the fringes of sanity. Viewers couldn't tell if it was comedy, madness, protest, or some strange form of performance art. All they knew is someone had climbed into their television set, uninvited, and that's an intrusion people don't forget. The FCC investigated with urgency. Agents analyzed the footage, tested frequencies, and attempted to trace the signal. WGN and WTTW engineers gave technical details about what they experienced that night. But incredibly, no one was ever caught. The hijacker disappeared as suddenly as he appeared, never making another broadcast. For decades, the case has remained unsolved, one of the most infamous cold cases in broadcast history. Theories, of course, flew like wildfire. Some believed it was just a group of tech-savvy college kids pulling off the prank of a lifetime. After all, Chicago was full of universities with electronics labs and rebellious students who loved to push boundaries. Others suspected it was a disgruntled insider, possibly a station employee or technician, who had the expertise to know where the vulnerabilities were. A darker theory claimed it was a calculated act of protest, someone trying to mock the commercialization of media. Using Max Headroom, a parody character of television consumerism, as a symbol to hit TV right where it hurt. What made the stunt unforgettable was its unnerving style. This wasn't just someone delivering a manifesto or yelling into a microphone. This was performance chaotic, unsettling, and theatrical. The distorted mask with wide, dead eyes, the unpredictable gestures, the nonsense phrases twisted into taunts. It was bizarre and creepy, precisely because it didn't make sense. Just like the Dyatlov Pass or the Yuba County Five, the horror wasn't in what you sit, was in what you didn't understand. And that uncanny factor has burned the Max Headroom hijacking into cultural memory for more than 30 years. Today, the actual clip lives on across the internet. Millions of people who weren't even alive in 1987 have watched it online, shuddering at the surreal interruption. True crime enthusiasts analyze it like detectives. Tech experts speculate on how the pirate signal was achieved. Urban legend fans whisper about hidden identities. Some even wonder if the hijacker was caught quietly and never named publicly. But officially, the mystery remains unsolved. Whoever pulled off the most famous broadcast hijack in U.S. history walked away without leaving a trace. What makes this case particularly haunting is that it could technically happen again. Even with modern digital broadcasting, vulnerabilities exist. In a world where hackers can crash systems with keystrokes, the idea of someone hijacking the largest stage of all the screen in every home is disturbingly real. The Max Headroom Incident wasn't just a creepy one-off. It was a reminder that the signals beaming into our houses aren't as secure as we'd like to think. One man in a mask proved that in 90 seconds you could disturb an entire city. Every retelling of the story ends with the same image burned into memory: a strange rubber mask, jerking in front of a warped background, delivering cryptic nonsense, while tens of thousands of people stared from their living rooms. No one knew who he was. No one knew what he wanted. No one ever found him. And that is why the Max Headroom hijacking endures as television's creepiest unsolved crime. It wasn't just a hacker. It was an intruder into the most trusted device in your home, mocking the system and disappearing forever. So next time you turn on the TV, staring at the polished studio lights and smiling news anchors, remember that night in 1987, when for 2 terrifying interruptions, the screen wasn't controlled by the networks, or the anchors, or the advertisers. It was controlled by someone hidden in the shadows. Someone playing Max Headroom's Frozen Grin. And someone who, even now, is still out there anonymous, unpunished, and laughing at how he pulled off the creepiest hijack in television history.